It happens in a split second. Your child is climbing that structure at the park, the one that feels just a little too high for comfort, and their foot slips. They don't fall, but they stumble. They freeze. And in that silence, you feel the pull in your own chest. Your muscles tense to rush forward, to catch, to save, to neutralize the threat. It is the most natural instinct in our biology. But I've often wondered if that instinct, the one that served us so well in the wild, is actually serving them in a modern world where the tigers are metaphorical. We are going to spend some time today sitting with that discomfort. We are going to look at the space between protecting our children from harm and robbing them of the very struggle that builds a resilient adult. When we talk about resilience, the cultural image is often one of armor. We imagine a child who is tough, who bounces back instantly, who doesn't let things get to them. But the clinical reality of resilience is softer and far more complex. It isn't about being unaffected by stress. It is about the capacity to move through it. It is the neurological confidence that says, "This feels bad, but I can survive this feeling." And here's the paradox we have to confront. To build that confidence, a child has to actually feel the bad thing. They have to experience the failure, the rejection, or the skinned knee. If we intercept the failure before it lands, we are effectively keeping their resilience muscle in a state of atrophy. But how much failure is too much? Where is the line between building grit and causing trauma? These are the questions that keep us up at night, staring at the ceiling fan. If you find yourself nodding, or perhaps feeling that familiar tighten in your chest thinking about your own parenting choices, you are in the right place. We are building a community of parents here who are less interested in quick fixes and more interested in the deep work of raising humans. If you want to be part of that longer conversation, I invite you to subscribe or follow along as we peel back these layers. Today, we are looking at 3 distinct philosophies of resilience: protection, exposure, and scaffolding. Not to judge them, but to understand the trade-offs we make when we choose one over the others. Let's begin with the protective stance. In recent years, this has been somewhat unfairly labeled as helicopter or snowplow parenting, terms that feel a bit sharp for what is essentially an act of love. The core philosophy here is rooted in attachment and safety. The belief is that a child cannot learn if their nervous system is in a state of alarm. Therefore, the parent's role is to act as a buffer, smoothing out the road so the child can focus on development without the distraction of undue stress. It posits that confidence comes from success. If we can curate a series of wins for our children, they will internalize a self-image of competence. It's a compelling logic. If they feel successful, they will act successfully. We remove the obstacles because we want to preserve their childhood innocence and protect their self-esteem from the bruising reality of the world for as long as possible. But what does this actually look like in our living rooms on a Tuesday evening? It looks like the forgotten homework assignment. You see it on the counter after they've left for school. The protective stance says you drive it to the school. It looks like the conflict with a friend, where you pick up the phone and text the other parent to resolve it, rather than coaching your child through the awkward conversation. It is a form of high-functioning management. We become the project managers of our children's lives. And if we are honest with ourselves, it feels good. It alleviates our anxiety. When we fix the problem, we get a hit of dopamine. We solved it. They are happy. The house is quiet. It is efficient, and in the short term, it creates a very smooth, frictionless existence for the family. However, every strategy has a price tag. The trade-off with the protective stance is a phenomenon researchers call learned helplessness. When we consistently remove the obstacle, we inadvertently teach the child that they are not capable of overcoming it alone. We trade their short-term comfort for their long-term competence. By clearing the path, we deny them the data they need to assess risk. If a child never forgets their lunch and goes hungry for an afternoon, they never learn the visceral cause and effect of organization. More critically, they develop a fragility regarding discomfort. If the parent always fixes it, the child begins to view any level of distress as an emergency rather than a manageable part of life. We prioritize their happiness today, but the cost is often their anxiety tomorrow, because the world will eventually present a problem we cannot drive to school to fix. Does this mean protection is always wrong? Of course not. That would be too simple. The protective stance is actually the best fit approach in specific seasons. It shines when a child is in crisis, during a divorce, a move, or a health struggle. When a child's reserve of resilience is already depleted, they don't need healthy failure, they need sanctuary. It is also the necessary approach for safety. We don't let them learn the hard way about traffic or swimming pools. The nuance is in recognizing when we are protecting them from danger and when we are protecting them from discomfort. One keeps them alive, the other keeps them small. This brings me to a thought that I've been turning over in my mind recently. We often think that our job is to reduce our child's anxiety. But what if anxiety is actually a necessary signaling system? When we treat all anxiety as a malfunction that needs to be eliminated, we might be silencing the very alarm system they need to navigate the world. Imagine if you never felt pain when you touched a hot stove. You'd burn your hand off. Anxiety is emotional pain that says, pay attention. If we mute that signal constantly, we aren't creating calm children. We are creating children who are deaf to their own instincts. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we find the exposure stance. This is the old school mentality, the rub some dirt on it philosophy. The core belief here is that the world is hard, and the sooner a child learns that, the better equipped they will be. This perspective prioritizes adaptation. It views the child as anti-fragile, meaning they get stronger the more stress is applied to them, much like a muscle or a bone. The philosophy argues that by stepping back completely, we force the child to activate their own resources. It is a sink-or-swim approach rooted in the idea that necessity is the mother of resilience. If you are hungry, you will figure out how to eat. If you are cold, you will find a jacket. It trusts the child's survival instinct above all else. In practice, this looks like the parent who stays seated on the bench when their child is crying over a stolen toy. It looks like saying, "Well, I guess you failed that test because you didn't study," and leaving it at that. It's a refusal to intervene. There is a stoicism to it. In a living room, it might look like a child struggling with a complex Lego set, getting increasingly frustrated, throwing pieces, while the parent calmly reads a book nearby, offering no assistance. The parent isn't being cruel. They are holding space for the child to solve it. They are waiting for the child to hit rock bottom of that frustration and push off of it. The trade-off here is significant, and it's one that often goes unspoken in the nostalgia for how we were raised. While high exposure can build independence, the cost is often emotional isolation. A child raised this way learns they can survive, yes, but they also learn that they are alone. They may internalize the belief that asking for help is a sign of weakness, or that their parents are not a secure base. Instead of resilience, we sometimes accidentally build armor, a hardness that repels connection. Furthermore, if the struggle is too great, if the sink or swim moment happens in a rapid current, the child doesn't learn to swim, they just drown. This leads to trauma, not growth. When the challenge exceeds the child's skills by too wide a margin, the result isn't grit, it's shame. Yet there is a time for this approach. The exposure stance is the best fit when the stakes are incredibly low and the natural consequences are safe. If your teenager refuses to put their laundry in the hamper, let them run out of clean clothes. If a toddler refuses to eat dinner, let them be hungry until breakfast. These are controlled environments where the lesson is sharp but safe. It is also effective for children who are naturally high agency and resist help. Some temperaments wither under guidance and bloom under autonomy. For them, the step back is a sign of respect, not neglect. There is a fascinating piece of neurology that complicates both of these views. It turns out that the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for regulating emotion and planning, isn't fully online until the mid-20s. This means that when we ask a child to just figure it out during a meltdown, we are asking them to use hardware they don't fully have yet. It's like asking someone to lift a heavy weight when they haven't grown muscles yet. But if we lift the weight for them, the muscle never grows. So we are stuck. How do we build a muscle without crushing the child? There has to be a third way. This leads us to the third perspective, often called scaffolding. In architecture, scaffolding is the temporary structure put up to hold a building while it is being constructed. It is removed once the building can stand on its own. In parenting, this is the middle ground between fixing it and ignoring it. The philosophy here draws heavily from the work of psychologist Lev Vygotsky and his concept of the Zone of Proximal Development. That's a mouthful, but it basically means, what can the child do today with a little bit of help that they cannot yet do alone? The scaffolding stance believes that resilience is a co-regulated process. We lend them our calm nervous system until they can build their own. We break the big, scary failure into small, manageable hurdles. What does scaffolding look like in the wild? Let's go back to the forgotten homework. Instead of driving it to school, protection, or shrugging and saying, tough luck, exposure, scaffolding looks like a conversation that evening. It sounds like, I noticed you left your math sheets. I didn't bring them because I know the teacher has a policy on that. But let's brainstorm a system right now so it doesn't happen tomorrow. Do we need a checklist? A special folder? It is active engagement without taking ownership of the result. It is sitting next to the child while they cry, saying, I know this is hard. I'm right here. But not stopping the difficult task. It is doing with rather than doing for or leaving to. I will not pretend this is the easy path. The trade-off of scaffolding is that it is exhausting. It requires immense patience and time, two resources parents are often short on. It is much faster to tie their shoes for them. It is much emotionally easier to send them to their room than to sit through the storm of frustration with them. Scaffolding requires us to tolerate our own discomfort while watching them struggle. It requires us to be present, observant, and constantly adjusting how much help we offer. It is a high-energy investment, and there is a risk of miscalibration, providing too much support for too long, which just becomes a sneakier version of protection. Scaffolding is the best fit for skill acquisition and emotional regulation. It is the gold standard for when a child is facing something new or slightly out of their depth. It tells the child, you are capable, but you are not alone. It builds that internal voice that says, I can figure this out, because they have a history of figuring things out with support. It is particularly crucial for anxious children who need to borrow a bit of your confidence before they can access their own. It bridges the gap between what they can do and what they can't. So how do we weave these together? I think it starts by changing our definition of failure. In the corporate world, in science, in tech, failure is just data. It's neutral. It tells you what didn't work. But in parenting, failure feels moral. It feels like a verdict on our child's future or our worth as parents. We need to strip the morality away from the struggle. When your child fails a test, it's just data. Oh, it looks like our study strategy didn't work. When they get cut from the team, it's data. The skill level here is higher than we thought. When we neutralize the shame, we make it safe to fail. One practical tool I found helpful in navigating this is the 24-hour rule. When a failure happens, a bad grade, a social rejection, a mistake, unless safety is at risk, wait 24 hours before intervening. Give them one full day to sit with it. Often, in that 24 hours, they will process the emotion and come up with a solution themselves. If we jump in at hour 1, we rob them of that processing time. We usually jump in because we are anxious. Waiting 24 hours forces us to regulate our own anxiety first. We also need to look at the stories we tell them about ourselves. Do we hide our own struggles? Do we only present our children with the finished product of our adulthood? If they never see us fail, they assume perfection is the norm. There is immense power in narrating your own resilience. I really messed up at work today. I felt terrible. But I'm going to go in tomorrow and apologize. Let them see the mechanics of repair. Let them see that you can wobble without toppling over. When we humanize our own struggle, we give them permission to be imperfect. We must distinguish between toxic stress and tolerable stress. Toxic stress is prolonged adversity without support, neglect, abuse, chaos. That damages the brain. But tolerable stress, struggling to learn an instrument, dealing with a mean teacher, losing a game, buffered by a supportive relationship, is actually what builds the brain's architecture. It's like a vaccine. A small dose of the virus teaches the immune system how to fight. A small dose of stress teaches the nervous system how to cope. Our job isn't to sterilize their environment. It's to ensure the dose is appropriate for their age and that we are there to help them process the fever. I want you to fast forward 20 years. Imagine your child is 25 or 30. They have a boss who is unfair. They have a partner who disagrees with them. They have a flat tire in the rain. What is the internal monologue you want them to have in that moment? Do you want them to panic and look for someone to fix it? Do you want them to shut down and give up? Or do you want them to take a deep breath and say, "This sucks, but I can handle it"? We are writing that monologue right now, today, with every lost sneaker and difficult math problem. This is where the art of parenting comes in. There is no algorithm for this. You have to look at the child in front of you. A highly sensitive child might need 80% scaffolding and 20% exposure. A thrill-seeking, robust child might need 80% exposure and 20% scaffolding. And this ratio changes daily. It changes if they are tired, if they are hungry, or if they are going through a growth spurt. The goal is not to pick one philosophy and stick to it rigidly. The goal is to have all 3 tools, protection, exposure, scaffolding, in your pocket, and to ask yourself in the heat of the moment, which tool does this situation require? Here is a question I ask myself when I feel that urge to intervene. Am I doing this for them, or am I doing this for me? Am I stepping in because they are truly drowning, or am I stepping in because I am uncomfortable watching them struggle? If it's for me, to quell my anxiety, to save face socially, to speed things up, I try to step back. I try to zip my lips and sit on my hands. It is an act of restraint, and sometimes it is the most loving thing we can do. Raising a resilient child is a long game. It is messy. It involves tears, yours and theirs. It involves watching them fail and resisting the urge to be the hero. But when we allow them to fail while they are under our roof, the stakes are low. A failed test in 4th grade is low stakes. A forgotten line in the school play is low stakes. These are the practice rounds. If we protect them from these, the first time they face real failure might be in a college dorm or a first job, where the consequences are life-altering. Let them stumble now, on the grass, so they don't crash later on the concrete. So the next time you are at the playground and they slip, or the next time they are sobbing over a project that isn't working, take a breath. Pause. Look at them. Trust that they are wired for this. Trust that struggle is not a sign that something is going wrong. It is a sign that they are growing. You are not a bad parent for letting them struggle. You are a brave parent. You are building the scaffolding that will one day allow them to build their own lives, sturdy and strong. I'm curious to know how this lands with you. Do you tend to lean more towards protection, exposure, or scaffolding? And more importantly, which one did your parents use? And how has that shaped how you handle stress today? I think identifying our own default setting is the first step in changing it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments or discussions below. I always learn so much from hearing how these ideas translate into your real lives. Until next time, take care of yourself and remember, you're doing better than you think.